Hello, this is Pracky, and this is going to be a video detailing my impressions of the game Blade Symphony, which was recently bought for me in Steam sales by a friend. So thanks for that. So as you may have noticed by now, Blade Symphony is a fighting game, sort of similar to something like Soul Calibur, except for the PC. And the gameplay is very unique, even though it is, I guess, a fighting game. I haven't really played any fighting games quite like this one before. I still don't really know whether that's a good or a bad thing, but I'll have a little talk about that in a short while. One of the things that you should have also noticed, if you know anything about video games, is that this is playing on the Source engine. Now, it's a bit bizarre to put a fighting game on a Source engine, and I don't think it's a particularly great move, but it makes a lot of sense when you consider that the developers of this game are Pure Human Games, who are the developers of Dystopia, which is a very, very good Half-Life 2 mod, possibly one of the best Half-Life 2 mods ever made. So they clearly have a lot of experience with the Source engine, so maybe they felt more comfortable making a game on the Source engine. But I wouldn't have typically said that it was an engine I would use to make any sort of a fighting game. But it's nice that they've tried, I suppose. It's the developer's choice, I suppose. That's what they feel they can make the best game with, and I can't really criticise them for that. So I've played this game for a good few hours now. This isn't exactly a first impressions video, it's more like first and a half impressions. I've certainly sunk quite a few hours into it, and I have played quite a lot of fighting games in the past, so I'm a decently competent fighting games player. I'm not the best by any means, but I do understand them fairly well. And I'm not even really sure whether this is much of an advantage, because I think it may have tainted my view on this game a little bit. Because I've played quite a few fighting games, I think what I expect from a fighting game may have made me a little bit biased against this game. I'm trying hard to give a fair opinion on it, but I do see quite a lot of problems that bother me maybe more than they would the average person. That's not to say Blade Symphony is a bad game. There's certainly a lot of fun to be had in playing it. I didn't feel bored when I was playing it, but I did feel that there were issues. However, there's definitely no issues with the graphics, first of all. I was really quite impressed with the graphics. They've really gone above and beyond what I thought the Source engine was capable of. A lot of people have by now, but these particular developers seem to really know what they're doing, especially with the environments. The environments look great. Not top standard, but really good considering how well the game runs. So that's quite a big plus, I think, and they should definitely be proud of that one. Also, the character design is fairly good, and there's a lot of customization in terms of being able to choose your outfit or your weapons, although as far as I can tell it's all cosmetic, at least at the moment. I don't know whether it's going to stay that way. Like I said, the game is in development. So this gameplay footage is just something that I recorded in an afternoon, really. It's mostly me getting my shit stomped by other players. No real excuse for that, mostly just me being kind of bad. But I think I have played enough that I kind of get what my flaws are. I just need to play a bit more to really get the hang of it. Apart from that, there's quite a few games where I'm obsing, and they are pretty strong players. They seem to really know what they're doing. So there's a nice little variation in this video of shit players to good players, I think, and I think mostly the shit players are me. So I suppose I should have a quick word about the characters and the equipment in this game. So as it stands at the moment, there are 4 characters in the game. All of them have their own unique moveset, and there are 5 weapons in the game which don't affect the moveset at all. The weapons are there to affect the properties of your moves, like it makes certain aspects of your offense or your defense more effective. For example, the scimitar is a multi-hit weapon, so you want to get in there and you want to combo the living shit out of them. Whereas something like the rapier is a weapon that's more suited to one of the characters in particular, where you just kind of dance around and you have a thrust at them every now and then you just kind of poke them to death. Apart from those two, there's the katana, the Jan, and the longsword. Please don't pick me up on the pronunciation of that Chinese sword that I just mentioned there, because I have no idea if that was correct. That really was just an educated guess. But despite the fact that there are this many weapons, I've seen a lot of katanas and rapiers. It seems like most people, if they want to win, typically seem to be using katanas at the moment. There's no particular drawback to using them, and they're just very strong in general, whereas a lot of the other weapons do have quite glaring disadvantages. The other weapon that I tend to see a lot is the rapier, which is on the one guy who focuses pretty hard on thrust. It suits him very well, as I'm sure you would imagine. Every so often though you do get some longsword guy mixed in there, and the strength of the longsword seems to be just slamming out the heavy attacks really, and parrying people away, and just trying to whack them through their own attacks. That's what it seems like anyway. That could be wrong. I haven't really seen or used the longsword all that much. Right, well, I think that's most of the prefacing done with, so I suppose I can talk about the gameplay now, which is what I've been dying to do. This isn't a traditional fighting game, by any means. For a start, you've only got one attack button, and the whole attack system is based around combo strings based upon the stance that you're in at the time, which is unique to that character. So, for example, you start off in your fast stance for one attack, you can switch to your balanced stance for one attack, and you go back to your fast stance for the third attack. And the actual number of the attack in the string varies the type of attack that you're doing, so it'll be a different animation, different damage, different range, different speed, things like that. As such, there's quite a bit of potential leeway in terms of making sort of customized combos, but in reality I'm not sure it's going to work that way. I'm just kind of the opinion that when people have this all worked out, they will typically be sticking to 1, 2, maybe 3 combos for mostly every situation. But that's not really much of a criticism, because that's the case with mostly every fighting game ever made. So I can't say that I have too much of a problem with it. There's also sort of a rock, paper, scissors element going on with the stance system, in that, for example, if you're using a fast stance, as you would expect, it's pretty fast, you can get in some quite reactionary punishes using your fast stance. But if somebody's using a heavy stance, which is much slower, and they're attacking into you at the same time as you're doing a fast attack, then their sword will just kind of barrel through you, and it'll parry away, and then sometimes the attack continues on to hit you. And that is exactly how I would expect it to function, honestly. So I think in this part of the video, this is me getting completely butt blasted by some guy playing the sort of Zangief heavier type character, who in fact took about 80% of my life in what seemed like one hit there. And I was trying to go in for fast attacks, and he was using stronger attacks, so pretty much every time that our weapons met, he just trashed me completely. So I think my strategy here was to do my best to try and get around him, but from what I can tell so far in this game, it's kind of mostly up to him to let me get around his back or around his side. For the most part, as long as he keeps the appropriate distance, he can just kind of poke me forever. And if I do manage to slip in around the side, it's because he overextended, it's not because I did anything too amazing. So I had this kind of tendency to try and jump behind people when I got a bit bored of dancing around. I think this is where personal preference comes into it, because this is a fighting game that is, as far as I can tell, almost entirely about pokes and tricking someone into doing an unsafe poke. And I've never really liked that in fighting games. I prefer games where the action's really fast and close all the time. But quite often in Blade Symphony I found people tend to dance around back and forwards. This is in fact a perfect example. 2 judgment players just kind of using charge attacks and hitting each other for about half their life every time. This kind of encourages a lot of turtley play. This is mostly specific to this matchup. The character that I was playing before really wants to get in close, but it seems as though that style of gameplay, unless you're at the very top level, isn't really that viable. As soon as you start to understand exactly what the stances are and exactly what sort of attacks people are going to be using at any point, then I'm absolutely certain that he would be a good character, probably one of the best. But for somebody who's quite new to fighting games or hasn't put in quite a lot of hours, I think you're going to struggle hard with people who just play very safe and just poke over and over. As such, I think my top tip is to, as soon as you get the game, go into a game by yourself, pick a weapon that you find interesting and a character that you find interesting, and try to figure out a couple of short little combos that come out really fast and have really good range, so that you'll be able to properly punish enemies and you don't end up flailing around like a retard the whole time. Since you can kind of cancel some attacks into other attacks as well, it might be possible to get some pretty safe strings going. For example, usually the last attack of any string seems quite unsafe to me, so if you did 3 or 4 attacks in that string, you got to the last attack, and then instead of finishing it off with just a normal click, you did, say, right and click to attack to your right, that might end the combo a lot more safely than just spamming it out. So in that sense, there is a decent amount of depth to the moves that you can be doing. But the real question is, how much depth can a fighting game that only has one attack button really have? And from what I've seen, the answer is not as much as a game that has quite a lot of attack buttons. There's plenty of technical stuff and metagame stuff going on in this game, but it kind of pales in comparison to the games that you would see at something like Evo. There's not really that much there. At the end of the day, you're just a guy swinging a sword around trying to trick your opponent into doing something silly so that you can swing your sword through their body instead. There's no complicated systems like super meter or tagging in and out or anything like that. You really are just waving your sword around. And I'm not bored of that yet. I probably will continue to play Blade Symphony, but I don't feel as though there's endless content here. I really feel as though if you played the game for 10 hours or so, you'll have seen pretty much everything that could possibly happen. The only thing that's gonna really impact your performance is whether you can recognize exactly how to improve and how to punish enemies and how to adjust your playstyle. That is the one huge strength of the gameplay in Blade Symphony. You have to do a lot of adapting to your opponent. That said, in low-level games, I can't help but feel that not only was I mashing a lot, but it looked like everyone else was mashing a lot. I don't think a lot of players know what they're doing yet. Oh man, I don't know. Since the sale, it seems like there's probably been quite a lot of people jumping on this game and they don't really know what they're doing, myself included. And it's not really a very fun game if everyone's just mashing like mad. But it can also get a little bit tedious to watch high-level games as well, because it kind of just seems like people are spamming out pokes in the hope that the other guy runs into it, and I can't blame them, because that seems like the safest possible way to win, especially if you're against somebody who doesn't really know what they're doing, because they're very likely to just kind of run into your attacks. So I think that there does kind of desperately need to be a good deal more gameplay added to this game to give it the sort of longevity that it needs to succeed. I'm not too worried about that though, because surely the developers will be adding more content. They're not going to keep a game with 4 characters and 5 weapons, surely. Another kind of big-ish issue that I have with the game, which is unlikely to be fixed, is the camera. There's a reason that most fighting games have a side-on camera, and that's because it clearly illustrates the range of your attack and the distance from your enemy. However, in this game, with the camera behind you in this third-person style, it's kind of hard to know exactly how far your attacks are going to go and exactly how far away your enemy is. This might just be me though, I'm not entirely sure. but sometimes I feel like I'm flailing around, and I feel like I should be hitting, but maybe I'm not in range. I don't know. On the subject of not hitting, there have been quite a few lag issues that I've noticed, or at least I assume it's lag issues. You can throw a little shuriken thing, and that's not particularly useful, but I have noticed that even when I've dodged out of the way of it by miles, I've kind of been sucked back into it and hit by it, and that is like the most obvious lag issue that I've had, but that's fairly minor. The more severe problems that I've had is that I've been chasing people around behind them, completely unloading into their back over and over and over, and I'm just not hitting them. And then they turn around, they swing their sword, it goes straight through my sword and hits me. I don't know if that's intended. I suspect it probably isn't, because it doesn't make a lot of sense, but it really does seem like the only possible reason is there's some sort of network thing going on. Also, I've had this problem whereby I can be attacking an enemy's back and not hitting them, and then the enemy attacks in the opposite direction from me, facing away from me, and their sword hits my sword and parries me away. That shouldn't be happening. Finally, I've had some sort of weird desyncs where the actual winner of the game didn't win the game. I don't know what the hell's up with that one, but on the round meter it says that some guy won the game, but he's lying there dead. But I'm not too worried about those bizarre bugs or anything like that, because they'll be fixed. I'm a lot more worried about the network stability and the latency and whatnot, because I strongly suspect that's out of the developer's hands and mostly to do with the source engine. So would I recommend Blade Symphony currently? Probably not, but if the developers can fix the balance of the game, and I don't mean character balance or weapon balance, I'm sure they'll be able to handle that over time. What I mean is more like making lots of different playstyles viable, then Blade Symphony might have a reasonably bright future. I strongly doubt that it's ever going to be a competitor for the main fighting games out there, but as a fun little side game to play against your friends or something like that, there is a fair amount of potential there. It's somewhat accessible to new players, and there is enough depth there that good players can reliably trounce lesser players. In fact, at this point in the video, one of the guys is quite high ranked, and I'm not convinced he even loses a match. But that said, I think the gameplay is simplistic enough that it's easy enough to see why he's winning, and if you were determined enough, I think you could probably copy his playstyle without too much effort. So I think it's fairly safe to say that there isn't too much of an executional barrier in this game, unlike a lot of other fighting games where there's ridiculous one-frame links or 67-hit combos that new players just could not be expected to do. Although in the long run, whether that proves to be a good or a bad thing, I couldn't really begin to speculate. Also, in the duel mode, when you're waiting for your turn to play, you'll be able to watch typically better players and maybe learn a thing or two from them, which is not a bad thing at all. Although I have to say that sometimes when I was in duel mode, I kinda did just want to play the game. I was a little bit sick of watching. But there are 2v2 game modes and free-for-all game modes out there, so if you shop around for servers a little bit, I'm sure you'll be able to find a game where you can play mostly every round, rather than just watching this grey Aegis guy ruffle stomp everyone, or just generally sitting in the queue to play, no matter which arena you're in. Well, I think I've covered mostly everything that I want to talk about. There's a few little issues like blocking and charge attacks that I didn't mention, but for the most part it's kind of intuitive and not really that important. I'll quickly go over charge attacks. As you can see, our little friend Grey Aegis here loves to charge attack, and once you charge up to a certain point it kind of changes the move that you're going to do and makes it a little bit different. And if you charge it up all the way, it's like a focus attack in Street Fighter 4, and it breaks through block. That's all there is to that. Don't know why I felt like I had to explain that, but I really did feel the need for some reason. some sort of OCD thing going on there, I think. So if you like what you've seen in this video and you're interested in playing a pretty different style of fighting game, then you really might want to log on Steam and see exactly what the price point of this game is, because it is fairly cheap. And irrespective of the fact that I just kind of didn't recommend it, because it's still in development and because I'm fairly confident that the developers are decently skilled, it might be a worthwhile investment to get it if it's on sale. But it's kind of a gamble really, because who knows what's going to happen with the game in 6 months. It seems like most of the engine stuff is done with, and all that's left is to kind of refine the gameplay. So I suppose this is kind of make or break time for this game. The developers really need to get working on this and try to gather some momentum and get some sales going. So I'll leave you with the rest of the footage I have of this guy just absolutely curb stomping everybody. And I hope somebody out there found this even barely useful to them. And maybe I'll see you next time.
By the way, you can change character now between matches.
Round 2. Fight! Stop! Round 2.